Welcome to episode 6 of Next Matters Most. In today's episode, we're talking to Don Azevedo. Don is an experienced business owner with a demonstrated history of working in the mental health care industry and is the owner at Azevedo Family Psychology. Don, in addition to that, is like a complete business leadership and executive Sherpa. He has so much wisdom, and I have been secretly doing as much as I can to absorb all of that wisdom on a monthly basis from Don for probably the past 5 years at least. And I have grown as a person, as a leader, and as an entrepreneur from some of the golden nuggets that are in Don's brain. And I know that through today's conversation, you'll feel the same way. Don and Don's expertise in mental health and mental well-being is so important for today's entrepreneur and today's business person and today's person. And there's a tremendous amount of overlap between the two fields. And I think it's often overlooked, and it's also undervalued. I think our capacity to be, mentally well and to be healthy as people is overlooked. We're used to just, work hard, play hard, just crush it at all hours. And, that sort of neglect for ourselves will ultimately take its toll on our happiness, our well-being, and our performance. So buckle up. You're in for a great conversation, extremely knowledgeable. And thank you to Don for participating in this episode. And thank you for all that you do and have done for me in my business career and for the community as we all work towards being happier and improving our mental well-being. Enjoy.
Cool. Well, welcome to the show, Don.
Thank you.
Still getting used to calling it a show when it's really basically a phone call with a video attached to it. But in the intro, I'm giving sort of as much of a bio as I can, but I'd love to hear from you, what you're up to, what you're working on, kind of the Don elevator pitch.
All right. So I'm a clinical psychologist, executive coach, voiceover artist, and entrepreneur. So obviously I like to do a lot of different things, but primarily my expertise is in human relations, how people interact with one another, develop relationships, and resolve conflict.
Yeah, that was exactly what I asked for, which was concise. And that's like the first time that's happened. So practice makes perfect. Well, perfect practice makes perfect, I guess, is another way to look at that. All right, cool. Well, let's jump right in. One thing that is special about our relationship is sort of the fact that we meet monthly and talk as a part of a business peer group. And through that, I've gained an understanding of the value of peer groups. What are your thoughts around kind of peer groups as a tool for personal and professional development?
They are invaluable. And the reason they're invaluable is because they are folks who will hold you accountable. Who care about you but are not in a romantic or familial relationship with you. They also tend to be folks who have similar interests, like our particular peer group are all business owners. And they share the same challenges, perhaps at different levels, but the same kinds of challenges, and can offer perspective on managing different situations that perhaps you would not arrive at on your own, or with loved ones who don't have the same experience.
Nice. Yeah. And this is, the show is Next Matters Most, and it's a large, wide umbrella of future of business, technology, and entrepreneurship. And I wouldn't say it's taken a different turn, given sort of the rise of new normalcy with the pandemic, but it's definitely placed a bigger focus on what are we doing now to kind of get ready for the future? And, mental health is a big part of that. And, part of your practice, I think, encompasses that, or, as a part of any relationship. I guess maybe you're the expert. Talk to me about mental health and, how that fits into your one's self.
Okay, that's a huge topic. So I might go on for just a bit.
That's great.
So emotional wellness is an aspect of mental health. When we think about mental health, we often think about um, resolving illness back to some normal activity. But when we talk about emotional wellness, we're really talking about how do you build resiliency? How do you build a sense of positivity and encouragement for living in the world? And emotional wellness is something that most folks need to practice more. It's like going to the gym for your emotions. So, how do you engage in emotional wellness? There are a couple of different things to look at. One is emotional literacy. This is being able to describe the various emotions that you experience. Many of us are very aware of fear and anger. We tend to run away from sadness and we don't stay with joy and love long enough. Those are the 5 kind of basic color emotions that there are. Our society certainly supports anger and the expression of anger. And if you're a male, it's particularly anger. For men, we're not really allowed to be afraid. We lose man points and a bunch of other things that are kind of ridiculous constructs. But fear is a part of being a human being. As a matter of fact, it's a major part. It's one of the more active emotions in humans. Sadness is a way of reaching out and connecting to other people. And of course, joy is an expression of celebration of whatever's happening around you. And love is a connection to another person or animal or thing because it brings you a sense of peace and serenity, hopefully. So those are the basic emotions. The intensity level needs to be understood, and then blending them needs to be understood. How do they go together to make all of the colors of the rainbow or all of the colors of your emotions? So that's emotional literacy. Then there's another aspect of it, which are the elements of emotional resiliency. These come from positive psychology, developed by Martin Seligman, brilliant guy, who did both learned helplessness, understanding depression, and learned hopefulness, understanding emotional wellness. So there are 5 elements that go into that emotional resilience: positive emotionality, positive emotionality, engagement, there it is, relationships, meaningfulness, and accomplishment. So the acronym is PERMA: positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaningfulness, and accomplishment. So how do you get to positive emotion? This is an attitude of gratitude, really being aware of the things that are around you that you really appreciate. I work out in the early mornings and I get to see the sunrise at least 6 out of 7 days a week. And the sunrise is often beautiful. Not always, sometimes there are clouds, but it's really beautiful. And the birds, when they come back in the spring, those are beautiful things. So noticing, and in the winter when you see the stars, because it's dark when we're doing this, that's another kind of beauty. And stopping to appreciate those things throughout your day is one of the ways to keep positive emotionality. That's just one thing, so I'll put that there. Engagement, this has to do, if you've ever read the book Flow, and I can't pronounce the man's name, but it's about how well you're engaged in whatever activity you're doing. Are you doing things that fascinate you so that time disappears and you're really connected to whatever you're doing? The more often you're able to do that, the more emotionally resilient you become because you're getting fulfilled. It's kind of a pretty obvious connection there. Relationships are necessary for human beings. We are a community-based creature. We need to be in relationship with other people. For some, you only need a few. For others, you need a big tribe to hang out with. Whatever is right for you, living solitarily is not a particularly common human trait. So positive relationships there. Meaningfulness. The things that you do in your life need to be in integrity with what your values are and therefore bring meaning to you. And everyone has a slightly different set of values. There's no right set of values. They're the ones that fit for you. And then your work will hopefully reflect those values, and you will engage in meaningful activity. The last one is accomplishment. And in America, in particular, we don't do this very well. We don't stop and really celebrate the things that we get done that are positive. You know, if we've gotten it done, we're kind of next instead of celebrating the done part. The only part we pay attention to is when we can't get it done, and then we beat up on ourselves. Well, that's not particularly helpful. What is helpful is celebrating what you are able to accomplish just for a moment. And I'm not talking breaking out, you know, $1,000 bottle of champagne. I'm talking just being able to sit back and say, wow, I got that done. Yes. Or crossing it off the list and letting yourself smile because it's accomplished.
All right. So yeah, I guess I should apologize because I basically asked you like an underpinning of your maybe entire field and profession to sort of sum it up in a nonchalant way. Like, hey, what is it about, you know, psychology that's cool, right? So I should have maybe made that a little more specific. But, you know, I guess I'm trying to relate to, you know, the future of stuff, of business, technology, entrepreneurship. And this is a tool. This is definitely a tool that folks should have in their toolkit, which is understanding some of these things and understanding how to build resilience, you know, and other people I've talked to, you know, knowing your story and kind of knowing your own place and why you're there, or people to do DISC or Enneagram to say, like, the more I know about myself, the more I can, you know, change or impact for the positive, the way I interact with others to lead to better outcomes. But I feel like mental health is like sort of always overlooked until it's a problem. It feels like that's always a sick care sort of thing, as opposed to saying, hey, like everything you just said, because we know each other. And I was going to even say Martin Seligman, like you introduced us to the book Flourish and Martin Seligman. And that was like very like momentous in my own sort of like life of being like, wow, it's more than just like a monoclastic goal, like one goal of like happiness or winning. It's everything. It's all those things that in perma. But it also is like, you know, for me, I was thinking for my kids, like, how do you build resiliency? What a nice exercise to do each day, just like you go to PE or go to do extra reading. And then I'm like, what am I doing to build resiliency? And then if I'm trying to share something with other people, and resiliency is one of these things, also just the awareness of everything you just said in terms of knowing that it exists and knowing that, hey, this is here and you should know it and you should pursue it more and pursue more knowledge in here, because the better you are inside, the better you're going to be able to achieve and to realize fulfillment in the future. I don't know. I mean, just comment, I'll take that and go wherever you want with it. But like, why is mental health like sort of seen, or why was it at least seen as a sick care, like lack of information, or wasn't, I don't know. It's like, I just haven't seen like people being like, I'm investing into my mental health. If anything, there was just like, that's an excuse for knocking off a few hours early or taking their vacation, like mental health day, ha ha ha. It wasn't like, no, be serious about this because it really can impact your well-being and overall like wellness in the future.
Well, so mental health has had a stigma because unlike illness, physical illness, which often has you incapacitated and you fall down and people have to come and take care of you, when mental illness hits, it's sometimes quite large and behaviorally based and scary. So think of a person, a bipolar individual who's in a manic state, who's running around screaming and engaging in rapid sets of behavior, and they're a little intimidating. Or someone having a hallucination, they look possessed. And that is actually how mental health was seen. You're possessed by devils. We don't understand how this is going. We don't understand how the brain works. So we're going to lock you away in mental health institutions where pretty sadistic doctors engaged in very torturous treatments, like ice baths, isolation, straitjackets, electroshock therapy, many things that at the time were horrific. And some things like electric shock therapy has actually evolved and is still used today, but at much lower voltages and much more targeted in the brain, because we understand a little bit more about how the brain works and how mental health works, at least neurochemically. So it was scary, and people don't like scary, so they push it away. They try to ignore it. And our culture is filled with language that says our emotions are bad and we need to get rid of them. Put a lid on it, put a cork in it. All kinds of statements like that you have heard a million times are all about stop being emotional. I've consulted in companies where they've said, don't bring your emotions to work. That's not possible. It is not possible. They are part of who you are, and they will go with you everywhere you go. That's like saying, when you come to work, go to the bathroom before you come here, because you're not going to get to go to the bathroom until you leave, right? Well, 8 hours, most people need to go at least once. They're not going to be able to hold it. Same thing with your emotions. Things are going to happen there in the workplace that are going to trigger emotions that need appropriate expression. So just like you don't want someone peeing in the middle of the workspace, you also don't want someone emoting in the middle of the workspace uncontrolled. To do that, though, you need emotional literacy. You need to be able to identify what emotion you're having, know how to soothe yourself, and then how to express it to the other person in order to build the relationship.
Yep. Interesting. And I want to hear from you about, like, if you had your dream state, and we're talking about the way that, the world is a happier place, because everyone's thriving, and the tools and the knowledge that you have are the way we'll get there. Take us on that sort of thought pattern. And I don't know if that makes sense, or if you need some like cues, but if everyone did more emotional literacy training, if companies thought about this in a different way, we would all have more basic, respect for each other, or we'd all be more resilient, able to handle things, and then therefore less, more. And yay, it's all, utopia. How do we get there?
Okay, I'm going to describe utopia.
Okay.
Everyone has a safe place to live, access to clean water, and good food. They get to sleep 8 hours a night, uninterrupted, solid. They work 40 hours or less in any given week so that they have time to dedicate to their family and their community. They have work that is meaningful to them, so it matches who they are and how they operate in the world. They have the capacity to take no less than 4 weeks of vacation, at least 1 week every 3 months, or 2 weeks in a row somewhere in there, and 1 week spaced out at the front end or back end of that 2-week vacation. The workload that they have is actually manageable in a 40-hour or less work week, and companies hire more people to accomplish the task if the task starts bleeding over, instead of reducing headcount and trying to get the most productivity out of each individual and therefore keep the most dollars. That companies stop measuring their success solely on the amount of money that they make. They start looking at what's the impact they have on all of the communities in which their company has a footprint. If we had those, and that's just the beginning. I mean, I can describe lots more things, but those things would lead to more physical health and the opportunity to create more emotional health, because people would have time for physical exercise, to cook fresh food instead of eating processed food, to have solid relationships because they could spend time with their spouse or with their children or with their family members. Time is an important thing, and we spend most of our time working, and we spend our best years working. thinking that when we're done, we'll get to connect to people. Well, that's not how it works. We need to connect to people all along. It's a both and, not an either or.
Is there a top-down version of that too? Like where the more impact, the more productivity, or, the more a company can measure themselves by these other non-return to shareholders or whatever means, the better something. I mean, how do we fill in that blank?
About how to measure the impact on a community or
Well,
impact
if
on employees?
everybody, well, I've got two things, and one thought is, in terms of getting to that utopia, for people to be able to, advocate for themselves, they must first know what they're after. Like, if I contain my work to this many hours, or I should want to spend time with people because that's what gives me emotional well-being, not working and just like paying this and then I retire later. Like, individuals might have a lack of awareness of what they're asking for, what they're not asking for, what they want, what they shouldn't want, and just because they're not self-aware. That to me is sort of like bottom up. And if everyone now has this education on what is well-being and what is emotional wellness, and everybody asks for it simultaneously, all companies, all jobs, to use that as one category, or all educational experiences, or all whatever, will adapt, because otherwise there's no market for people. That won't always happen, because not everyone will become universally educated in what it means to be doing well, or as to be happy, to be filled, to have purpose. To know that, hey, if I get more impact in my community, I'm going to be more productive on the job. If I get these vacations, I'm going to drive more ROI out of my working hours. So sometimes it's like, well, how does, look at all the stuff with government. It's like, well, government's in control, the politicians are. Well, actually, no, it's corporate America. Not to go down that rabbit hole, but like sometimes some shit is top down, right? So like, are there things that, are advisable to companies to say, hey, encourage this because, and then if you do encourage said thing, you will likely see these benefits. It should, meaning, is there a way for this to be an abundance mindset for companies? Like, hey, if you do this, better things will happen.
Sure. So a top-down model of this is, well, first off, structure your work the way I described, so that people have the time to sleep, have the time to interact with their families, encourage them to go out and be in their community and to bring back the activities that they do in their community, so that now your people are more vibrant than just workers. So do that. Improve your vacation policy so that people have the time to go off and replenish themselves. Encourage continuing education. So offer these in the workspace, or where people could go off for a day or two and get this information and bring that to the workplace. Here are things that you can do. And as a company, we'll throw $100 toward that, but you have to throw money to it as well, because people who invest in themselves are going to get more out of something than if it's bought for them. I'm a big believer in the more that you invest yourself in something, the more you actually pay attention and learn it. So I'm a big one for kids helping to pay for their college education, for working to get their bike or that kind of thing, making some money themselves in a way that is reasonable, right? Not that they have to earn the total amount of the bike, but something that is within their capacity to do, because they're now invested in whatever that thing is or whatever that knowledge is. So companies could do all of those things. And here's going to be the hardest part. You talk about top down. The number one thing that creates culture in an organization is the modeling of the C-suite. How does the C-suite treat the next level down? And how does that next level down treat the next level down? And that's a trickle-down effect. If I treat every individual I interact with honor and respect, just because you've had that from me, you will be more inclined to do that down the line. Now, I can tell you to do it, you won't do it. But when I demonstrate it, you're much more likely to do it. When I model how to resolve a conflict, or how to have a difference of opinion with somebody and then come to a conclusion. And so we didn't even get to conflict. We just had a different view of how to get things done. I'm modeling this kind of respect and honor and humanity in the workplace. We could start there. If I could get every C-suite to start doing those things, we would improve the emotional health of lots and lots of people.
Yep. And modeling the way is a big kind of leadership tactic. And I was going to make the joke of, can you still yell at people with all caps on Slack? Or is that sort of like, you have to cut that out? And I'm not trying to make this like all like commercially driven, but there's something here like, what does a more vibrant organization look like, and how does that do better in the world? I mean, one simple commercialization of this idea is you'll just get the best people, and you'll get the most out of your best people. So the getting the best work out of the best people has to have some sort of geometric or exponential multiplier on the outcome of your business. So that's in and of itself, that alone probably is enough, and we can like not talk about it ever again. But what about people who need more? Like, if this was hey, company, turn your company into, design the workforce and workplace of the future built around these principles of mental or emotional wellness or something. Because is there more to it than what I just mentioned, which are the kind of obvious high level, adders?
The only thing I would add to what you said is it's not just the best people. So you'll turn folks who are moderate performers into much better performers who work collaboratively with others. You'll start adding intelligence instead of subtracting or dividing it, and maybe even multiply that intelligence. That's really what you're looking for, is a multiplication of the capacity that you have. So yeah, you can try and get the top 1% of the intelligence or creativity or whatever you're measuring that employee by. And that's a very small pool. And so you're fighting a lot for it. But if you take the next 10% down, they may not be the absolute best, but if they work together in great teams, they'll accomplish more. And if you take the next 50%, so that includes some people who are lower than the average, but you help them to have better relationships with one another and bounce ideas off of and be creative and innovative and anticipatory of what's going on in the future, those teams will be way more productive than any of the individuals that are at the top of that pyramid.
Yeah. So is this one of the most like kind of overlooked like company opportunities in our, I don't know, time or in our genre, meaning like, I'm thinking like, well, we'll focus on, so there's someone invented Six Sigma. It's like, okay, performance and measurement, there's other things around, communication. There's stuff separately around, HR and supporting and parenthood. And there's things that are like nibble around the edges of things that lead to emotional wellness. But is anyone focusing on that? And is this like an opportunity in the marketplace?
It's a huge opportunity in the marketplace. And no, I don't think very many, if any, people are focusing on this. And if they are, they're not getting the headlines so that it's known by lots of other people. And in part, it's because when you create this kind of atmosphere, it becomes harder and harder to measure what's the direct impact. You can measure it in things like there's lower turnover. You can measure it in the sense that people are productive, but not super productive. I'm part of our whole issue about measuring productivity is if I'm an employee and I'm 28 years old and I'm measured on productivity, I will sacrifice my family and myself to work harder in order to get the next raise or to get whatever the next thing is for me.
Yep.
That's counterintuitive. And I've seen this on internships from business schools. So I coach with some business schools, and people have gone off on internships to, in this particular case, high finance places in New York, and literally worked for 3 days straight, no sleep, not eating well, using lots of caffeine. I hope it's only caffeine, and ruining their physical health and emotional health because they think they have to outperform everybody in this 1 year of internship to get a job. That's not really what we want, but it is what a lot of those financial institutions cultivate. They kind of like watching the kids work that hard.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, we've talked kind of a decent bit about, ways to apply some of this to the world in a higher impact. I mean, what do you think is next, kind of in terms of you and your entrepreneurial spirit and endeavors, and knowing that you do see people and can make the one-to-one impact, but you have this ability to potentially impact the masses. What are you thinking for yourself that you're going to prioritize over the kind of near, middle, and long term?
Well, for myself, I'm going to be working for a little bit longer. I would love to have the opportunity to work with corporations who are interested in this idea of emotional wellness and emotional resiliency. And if a C-suite would come to me and let me work with that whole C-suite and think about how they could organize their company to promote emotional wellness, that would be a lot of fun for me, and I think incredibly productive for a company. So that would be great. I also hope to do more of these video and podcast events to spread the word about how do you stay healthy? How do you improve your emotional resilience in the world? I do a podcast now called The Relationship Road Trip that's focused on how do you keep the relationships in your life healthy and happy and growing. And these are not just your spouse or your kids, but also your work relationships and your extended family members and the people in your community.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things I'm looking for. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And we all have like skills, and we all have our own tools. And so you have mastery of this tool. And so in that lens, when you work with somebody as a coach, I mean, talk to me about that. Like, how are you setting them up to say, hey, I'm taking up, like, a functional doctor might have one thing, like, I'm going to look at your chemistry and I'm going to look at these things. And holistically, we're going to get you like at utmost performance in terms of chemically, right? Or diet, exercise, weight, optimal things, lowering health risks. Coming from your angle, when you're working with somebody, taking a holistic approach, walk me through that sort of thought process and how you set them up for like here's where we want to go, and here's how we're going to get there, and here's how these are the parts of that holistic approach that we'll take.
So when I'm coaching somebody, the key thing is what's the goal they want to achieve? I'm not the one determining that goal, they are. So if they establish, here are the goals that I want to do this and this and this, then I'm going to assess, well, where are you right now today vis-a-vis the outcome that you want? And they'll describe that to me. And I'll say, if you actually hit this outcome, how would the behaviors you just described today look in the future? And then we'll create a path of practice to go from where you are to where you want to be. And I'll bring to the table skills that you can learn. It's a little like physical therapy, right? If you, or even physical training, if you go to a physical training coach and you say, I want to have better upper body strength, first thing they're going to do is measure, well, how much can you curl and other things, but how much can you curl? They'll figure that out and say, all right, here's a regimen for you to improve your biceps and hopefully your triceps, or else your arms get really funky. Same thing with this. So you describe your current state and your future state, and I give you exercises that you then implement, and I coach you along to get to that spot. If you have trouble setting those goals, I'll listen to your story and pull from it the things I think you might want to do, offer them to you and let you think about, do those work for you? Because sometimes people come to me and they don't know really what the outcome is, but they don't like where they are. And so fully describing that, telling me the story, often gives me clues to where they really want to go.
Yep. Are you ever tempted to just answer that with one of these like obvious things of, hey, I want a bigger upper body, and you're like, well, what about perma? You know, like, because why do you want that? Because of this. Why do you want that? Because of this. Why do you want that? Because of this. Well, are you really, how emotionally well are you? Are you focusing on ultimately fulfillment and happiness or whatever, you know? And how are you ever tempted to just sort of like break it all down back to even that business goal, right? Like, I want to do this for my leadership. Why? Oh, because I want more time. Like, why? What are the actions you're going to take? It's these. Well, couldn't you get some of that fulfillment and that happiness or that well-being today as you get there? Does that start to creep into your practice?
Absolutely. And it depends on the individual and what they're asking for and what's going on. But yeah, I'll bring in other things for them to consider. Like, for instance, someone comes in to a physical trainer and says, I want a stronger upper body. To do what? Right? How would that help you? What would it do for you? If you had that right now, in what way would you experience the world? I'd be able to do rock climbing, which I can't do now.
Yeah, that's right.
Huh?
As a practitioner, you probably can't make these statements, but you know, if you had to say, like, if you had to just say some big, you know, tweetables or headlines, like, you know, better emotional wellness leads to X, you know, what are things that are really going to draw people's attention into this as a subject?
Greater emotional resiliency leads to stronger relationships, leads to better outcomes, more innovation, and greater creativity.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Sorry, I put you on the spot again. So to me, and here's the thing, like, for me, everything that I pick up from you is new sometimes for the first time, but then it becomes so obvious. And Flourish, the book by Dr. Seligman, was a huge sort of thing that allowed me to articulate some of those things. And I feel like we're having this convo and it's like, yeah. But as it relates to the world, you know, new entrepreneurs, existing entrepreneurs, people that are trying to innovate, we're not necessarily talking about the future of health tech or delivery of care models or, you know, new science breakthroughs like this. And I'm sure because of your like expertise, you've got thoughts on some of those that you can, you know, just comment on if you want. But like, to me, it's like, this is more of like a untapped potential of like of humankind. If you don't realize if you don't shore up yourself, you're not going to be able to get to any place in the best way possible. And why don't people, I mean, why isn't this like more obvious and more resources, more everyone being like, oh, power of positive psychology, oh, perma, like, why isn't everyone just like geeking out about this? Why aren't there like little perma trackers on your wrist? You know, what's keeping this from being as mainstream as it probably should be?
You know, that's a really good question. And it's likely just because no entrepreneur has figured out how to capitalize on getting this word out and doing this kind of education.
Yep. What are the entrepreneurial opportunities? I mean, it's not always like software or tech, right? I mean, it could be coaching. It could be working with people and tracking it. It could be building a system that has some sort of, you know, measurement in place so that people have a quantifiable piece as well as the qualitative piece. I mean, have you explored what the opportunities might be in that?
Well, the opportunity could be software. It could be software that prompts you to be grateful, prompts you to say thank you to people, prompts you to recognize in more detail what someone has done that's made your job or your life easier. It could be software that prompts you to, hey, you know, you haven't talked to your friend this in a month. Maybe you ought to give them a call. It might be software that says, hey, looking at your sleep, you've had less than 6 hours of sleep for 5 days in a row. How could you organize yourself to get a better night's sleep for the next couple of nights at least? Something that would help us set goals and track them with us so that we stop and really think about how are we taking care of our emotional health?
Yep. No, I love that. And I think, I was just thinking about for myself, I'm not good at this at all. I'm not, I know all these tools, like I remember them. I'll get these little like, oh yeah, that was in the book, little anecdote, but you can't just read the same book over and over and over. And, there's even dashboard sort of overload, like, oh man, another freaking dashboard. And even dashboard or product aside, like how would one keep themselves, how should anybody, or how could anybody keep themselves accountable? What should they be checking in on? What should they be sort of reflecting back? Are there systems, calendar reminders? And PERMA is a lot. Each one of those categories is the title of that then is a funnel that opens up to many pieces in each one. You can't look at that every single day. Like, did I do my P, my E, all that? What are my relationships? What about this? Accomplishments? Like, these are things that happen over time. But if you lose track, you kind of lose maybe the adherence to, fulfilling all of those buckets and all those pieces of the pie. How could people stay on track with this?
It's like creating the habits that you need. So if you think about driving a car, it's an amalgamation of many, many subroutines that when you're first learning, you have to pay real close attention to, like how much am I turning the wheel and what effect is that having on the car? Am I seeing what's in front of me and what's behind me? How much pressure am I putting on the gas pedal? Where's the brake? Are my lights on? Are my windshield wipers on? How much windshield wiper? Lots of different small things that end up becoming habit and subroutines so that you can drive and not actually pay attention to what you're doing anymore. You can hold complex conversations, or sometimes it happens for me. I'm thinking about something really hard and I will drive someplace automatically and not actually remember the route that I had taken, which is a little scary, but that does happen, I have to admit. And I've gotten there safely every time. This actually happened yesterday. I was supposed to be going to one place, but it was part of the route to going to my office. And I realized as I was 3/4 of the way to my office that I wasn't intended to go to my office and had to turn around and come back. But I was driving on automatic because I was thinking about a bunch of other things.
I thought you were going to say you're already sitting at the office, waiting for your next meeting to show up before you realize. And then 2 days passed.
No, I didn't get quite that lost.
Okay.
So if you picked one or two things and then worked them until they were a habit, like brushing your teeth, what would those one or two things be? It might be the attitude of gratitude, practicing gratitude with the people around you and with the experiences that you have. It might be taking the time to breathe and check in with your body. What am I feeling? What are my emotions? What are my thoughts? Doing that 2 or 3 times a day, right? We have other habits. We eat 2 or 3 times a day. Some people 4 or 5 times a day. Most people brush their teeth in the morning and the evening. Some people after every meal. Those are habits. Build the habit. How will that happen? Over a long period of time. And when something becomes a habit, then you get to add another thing. And then you get to add another thing. So if you start with your very young children, teaching them about gratitude, and a way to do that is around the dinner table at night, go around and say, hey, what are 3 things that you really liked about today? It will become habit for them. Which friends did you talk to today? Well, now we've got positive emotionality and relationships coming out right there at the table.
Yeah. I mean, like many entrepreneurs, I had what I thought was a great idea, didn't really go anywhere, but it was with my, I think, oldest son, who's 9, wanting to start a company doing the WWW notebooks, like what went well. So I was like, let's make a notebook line called WWW, sort of like a weird interplay with the internet, but it's really a notebook, and then kids would write it down. He's like, so we're just going to sell notebooks? I'm like, yeah, but it's going to be WWW, and it's going to be like, write 3 things that went well, because you're building resiliency and you're by practicing gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be, there's some I'll do my best to like cue this up in the intro, because I think, there's a lot of awareness that I have around this subject that I think is just under recognized and underappreciated sort of in the marketplace, meaning there's not, how are there that many like digital whole self coaches? Like there's digital assistants, digital physical trainers, digital medicine, but this could be something where you need technology and a human to help keep you on track and ask you these things. And it's a lifelong practice. It's not a take this pill. It's not a cut out the fatty, whatever things, or cut out carbs. It's sort of like, it's a lot of stuff, and it's a practice and routines. But why? I asked you this, and maybe there's just no answer right now, but why is this so overlooked? Why aren't there so much more like messaging and like products geared at this, and industries or services, or like, resellers, like it's the, whole self coaching system. Like, why hasn't that really popped off?
Because you and I haven't built it yet.
Okay, cool. Sweet.
I really think that no one has seen the market potential for it, and it's hard. So it's hard to do. There are some things out there. So there are mindfulness apps that help you meditate and become more mindful of your experience in the world, more in the present. A lot of our culture pushes us either to be in the past or the future. And both of those places are experiences of mental disease, actually. So if you're too far in the past, you tend to be depressed because you're looking at all your failures and all the things you wish you could have done differently. So looking into the past leads to depression. If you look into the future, you tend to catastrophize and think about the bad things that could happen and actually bring them in and experience them as if they're happening right now. That's anxiety. So our culture doesn't actually have us live in this moment and pay attention to the people that we're actually with in whatever moment we are, no matter who they are, from the person serving your table at a restaurant to your closest friend or your spouse. We don't emphasize that as important. And so this is not an area that has become marketable. Our emotional health has not been important.
Yep. Anyway, I think that's maybe, hopefully, well, I was going to say maybe more profound than we even kind of know. And I think as we sort of let this conversation unfold and then follow-ons, there's something about, people love headlines, so like this is how, this is the new wave of health, right? So like as all this other health stuff gets so much better and smarter, and there's devices and there's remote monitoring and there's digitalization and transformation, now there's maybe room for kind of this other wave of health to take hold. And how can it not be? Anyways, just because I'm on that, this is you live this every day. So this is maybe, I'm sorry if I'm kind of just like, restating maybe what you think all the time, but to me, I'm like, this is just so obvious. And even, to put my business owner hat on, my entrepreneur hat, I need more practice in this. I need a tool. I need like a constant reminder. I would pay for something that's a service or a tool or coaching or a digital coach or whatever, because you don't even know, it takes years to build your practice and then realize the outcomes, but the outcomes that we sort of hinted to aren't just singular. It's not like, and then sales went up 25%, because that's actually missing the whole point. The point is, I thought I wanted sales because I wanted this other thing, because really I'm searching for like my own fulfillment and my own well-being. So what if I can get well-being with success and accomplishment as a subset of that, or as a big, large component, but I still want all those other components, because that without the other, just accomplishments without, healthy relationships and healthy, like, emotional, attachments and healthy whatever isn't enough. It's sort of like, it's lonely. Right. So, I don't know. I think, and then strengthening one's emotional wellness just has so much like potential to unlock for individuals as entrepreneurs, as businesses, to impart that on others and help encourage it. I wonder if, I mean, anyway, we're in the midst of COVID. Obviously, these aren't live, but this is the midst of COVID. Now there's a kind of civil unrest, I guess, around many things going back hundreds of years with like race relations and whatnot, triggered by some of the events. And it's like, man, if only some of these things were already, common practice with, emotional wellness would be, how would we be able to relate with each other? How would we be how would we be able to, we would have that resilience more so to be able to adjust and adapt. I mean, in terms of trends that you're seeing, what are trends, whether it's outside of your sphere in terms of your practice, but you're seeing stuff and you see kind of emotional well-being as an opportunity that can be applied to some of the things, or are there trends in your own, I mean, obviously you can't share much, but that you're seeing kind of on macro levels that you think are worth, mentioning?
Well, if you'll remember, I talked about one of the top-down things is modeling. We have no leadership in this country that is modeling emotional health. None. Not in any part of our government is there anyone or any set of people who are modeling emotionally healthy ways of dealing with challenges in the world. What we model is combat. What we model is scarcity. What we model is, how do I get mine, regardless of the effect on you? So think about that when you read the headlines next about what our leadership is saying and doing. It really is about scarcity. It really is about, I need to get mine, and I don't care whether or not you get yours. Well, if the modeling is like that, we're fighting a huge uphill battle to say to folks who are already struggling with, am I financially secure? We have the highest level of unemployment in the longest time. One of the things that provides security to a person is to have meaningful work that pays you a meaningful wage. And there's no reason why we can't have meaningful work that pays a meaningful wage and still make a profit for the people who are owners in that company. But to do that, our leaders have to have courage, and they have to demonstrate emotional health and positive emotionality and the capacity to resolve problems in relationships, instead of going and grabbing their laws and saying, because I have the power to do this, bam, there it is.
Yeah. How are you living this yourself? And this doesn't have to be like for today, but over the years, as you've honed this skill and now you are aware, I hope, I mean, obviously, hopefully you don't just lay it all out in the field and then completely ignore it when you go home. It's, ingrained in your DNA, I hope, in the picture of my mind. But what are some easy things, similar experiences that you can share, obviously, of where you've, made small adjustments to improve your kind of emotional wellness?
Well, in all the companies I've ever run, one of the practices at whatever our weekly meeting is, where the entire team comes together and says, I run small businesses, so I don't have thousands of people. I have tens of people. But when we come together to set agendas and move forward as a company, that we always start with appreciations. And the intent here is that each person needs to find something that someone else has done that's made their life easier, and to report it behaviorally. This is the behavior the person engaged in, and this is the effect it had on me or on the company or on our clients. And I got people, this is every week, at least one day a week, they're paying attention to this. I practice myself going around to all of my employees periodically and noting what they've done well that's moved the company forward, ideas that they brought to the table, the way that they've executed, attention to detail, any of those things. And I hand it to them with behavioral specificity, not only in what they did, but on the effect that it had on the company. And then as appropriate, I even reward that with time off or with money, depending on what the person wants, or sometimes awards, because some people like having a certificate or an award. It depends on what the person likes as a reinforcer. But those are things that I've done with every company. because what I want is an environment where people invite people to engage with them, to solve problems, and to innovate. That's one.
Yep. What about personally? Have you done anything to kind of, I remember like one story you mentioned of like wearing a clown outfit or something on the way home. What is there something that one, or I mean, I don't know, it's going to be a cliffhanger if you don't describe that, but that or something like that, where you like kind of had a moment of realization and awareness that you then you took action and had, you know, improved results.
So to tell the story for your listeners,
hopefully it's plural. Just kidding.
Yes, hopefully it's plural, and not just your parents.
That's right.
So when I was younger and my children were younger, I was doing primarily clinical practice, and sometimes that can get heavy. The stories that I hear throughout the day can weigh heavily on your heart, and I don't want to bring that home. So I have a commute. Usually it's about 20 minutes, where I have the opportunity to gather myself, to shift from being clinical psychologist, business owner, to father, husband, Don. Sometimes that was really hard. So I needed something that would knock me up out of myself. So I had a clown nose that I kept in the glove compartment. And at the beginning of the commute, I would put the clown nose on and then drive along slowly, stopping at as many stoplights as I could, looking around at people as if there was nothing on my face. And children would laugh and point and get their parents to look. Parents would drive away quickly. Any response made me smile. Any response took me out of that whole day of hearing difficult stories and into this playful, more open, connected to a wider world, and ready for my children when I got home.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, I love that one. And you know, I've said that's very relevant for me with the young kids and wanting to be able to shift gears, or being aware that like, hey, it's too easy just to carry this right on in without, you know, creating that separation. I want to kind of keep it somewhat on time, but if you have a short way of saying this, because I know this is a whole other can of worms, but, you know, putting yourself first, there's a trend, and, you know, just, you know, you've got your business, your employees, your ideas, your spouse, your kids, your friends, you know, why that's that you just named a lot of interested parties and you didn't talk about yourself. Putting yourself first can seem selfish. Like, well, you know, I'm going to do my own needs first. Like, what about all these people that have needs? What's sort of the mindset that you would share with people on why you would put yourself first, or any kind of thoughts around making sure that you're taken care of in order to help care for and tend to others?
Well, in every relationship you will ever have in your entire life, you are always present. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not really capable of being in relationship or caring for other people, or at least not for very long. If you don't take care of yourself, you'll fade out. This is just like when you get on an airplane, if anyone will ever get on an airplane again. The stewardess or the flight attendant, that's the correct term. I'm an old man. Give me a break.
I'll edit that. I'm just kidding.
The flight attendant says, if you're traveling with children and we experience decompression, put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then take care of your children. But what they don't explain is, if you don't do that, right? If you don't take care of yourself first and you go to do this for your kid and your kid struggles in any way, you become anoxic. And when that happens, your dexterity goes to zero. Your cognitive functioning diminishes over time, and you will stay conscious long enough to watch your child pass out before you pass out, right? And hopefully you'll survive because they'll get low enough and you can breathe again, but you might not. So if you take care of yourself first, you've got the oxygen, you have plenty of time. If your kid struggles, you can still get that oxygen mask on them. So that metaphor is around, if I take care of myself, then I'm in a better place to take care of the relationships I have with everyone else.
Yep. No, it's another, I'm saving all these amazing little gold nuggets to the end. I guess last thing, and then we'll break. And I definitely like, and I'm very appreciative and grateful for you to spend time here going through things that you already know, that you actually already talked about in forums that I've been in. So it's kind of repeating some things that are maybe, second nature to you, but to me, I'm like, I feel like there's more awareness around this, more opportunity to unlock for individuals to be their best selves, and therefore companies, et cetera, and population well-being. With health, it's funny because it's like, oh, population health, improve population health. Like, well, what if everyone's miserable? Like, did you really help, or did you just make a bunch of healthy miserable people and the world still sucks? So this is a huge kind of category that I think as we have more conversations and as others have more conversations, I think more fidelity will kind of come there. Like, it'll get more into focus, and like, this is what's needed and why, and how we get actionable. Because if it's not super actionable, people might just be like, that was a cool convo. Put yourself first, next. It's like, damn, man, we just talked for an hour for that person to get that 30-second tidbit. But I think there's way more there to unpack. Are there resources? If it's somebody who's like, I can either like re-listen to this, read the huge book of Flourish by Martin Seligman, or like go to like a website, or like, is it Googling emotional wellness and resiliency? Like, what are resources people should use if they're like, I'm interested in this? I mean, the book is a good resource, and looking up PERMA or something, I don't know, but where would you send people as a kind of a starter?
Looking up emotional resilience will get you plenty of websites. Seligman's website, AuthenticHappiness.com, is another great website. There's actually a society for positive psychology. I think it's the International Association of Positive Psychologists. IAPP, I think, is what it is. I may have that wrong, folks, but you can look it up. It's an international association, and it's about positive psychology. So you'll find it somehow. All of those have got great websites. If I had to give you a smaller book that would give you a better perspective about how the way that you tell the story about your life to yourself makes a huge difference, it would be Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And what that book essentially says is the story we tell ourselves about the experiences we're having create the impact more than the event itself.
Cool. I'll definitely read that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this morning, like with my 9-year-old, for some reason, we kind of got into the story of like, why make your bed if you're just going to like mess it up tonight? And I'm kind of like, well, why make your bed if you're eventually going to like live on a planet where the sun goes out and we're all wiped out anyway? So it's like, come on, man. Like, so it's like, because there's a purpose, there's meaning, there's more to it than just like we exist and we're blips and then we're nothing. So that, I mean, I heard you say man's search for meaning, and maybe I was on that little bit of a search this morning before I had my coffee. Or I was just sort of like, stop fighting every chore. I'm not sure. But okay. Well, on that note, let's wrap up, and thank you for joining. Do you have any of your own links or sites or references that you'd like to point people to?
Sure.
And I'll also post those in the kind of notes.
Okay. So I do a weekly podcast called The Relationship Road Trip. You can find it wherever you get podcasts, or at www.relationshiproadtrip.com. My website, Azevedo Family Psychology, has lots more information and other resources that you can find there, and a blog that I post a variety of topics about mental health and psychology.